Sie die Toilette? Ja, ich bin jetzt gleich. Dankeschön. Vielen Dank.
Ich bin da hinten gefahren, dass die Leute nicht im Bild stehen. Weil ich war den ganzen, alles was hinter mir war, da stand ich als. Dann habe ich gesehen, dass da die Schaukel war. Das ist halt nicht gut, wenn du da so eine Affenschaukel durch den Flur hängst. Das ist blöd. Das ist alles verklebt, ne? Ja. Keine Chance. Das habe ich heute Morgen so übernommen. Ja, ja. Mir sehr leid. Nee, ich hab mir dann ja schon gedacht, dass das nicht alles muss. Jetzt weil wir gut über die Treppe hochgehen können. Also jetzt noch schade, 2 Meter, das mir reicht. Ja.
We're going to be talking about how authoritarian regimes build digital walls and how to overcome them. And for that, I want to welcome my panel. Please, panelists, join me on stage. We have Valentina Aguana. She's an activist and assistant engineer and the project coordinator for Noticias Sin Filtro. Welcome. Patrick Böhler is with us. He is the founder of Gazeta, which is a media research lab which is aiming to build resilience against against authoritarian regimes. Welcome, Patrick. Chen Pokong, please join us on stage. He is a Chinese-American activist, author, political commentator, and also a very successful YouTuber. Welcome. We have with us Gypsy Guillen Kaiser. She is the Chief Global Affairs Officer at the Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ. Welcome, please. Oh, sorry, Patrick. And completing our panel is Andreas Gebhardt. He is the CEO and co-founder of Republika, which is, I believe, the largest web summit here in Germany, right? Yeah. Welcome, Andreas. Okay, we've already lost some time, but we still want you to be part of the conversation. So what we're going to do now, we will show you a QR code, and we'll ask you to scan it, and then answer the question that we will be showing you in a moment, and later we will take a look at the results. So if we can have the QR code, please, for the question to the audience. We want active participation. Okay, hello, Liz. Can we have the code, please? Ah, there it is. Okay, so we want to know from you, how can we bridge the generational tech gap in fighting censorship? Please scan the QR code, type in your answer as we go along, and then we will read out some of those answers later on. All right, Andreas, I want to start with you. We've asked the audience that question, but is there a generational tech gap, or are we starting with the wrong assumption?
I think these are two questions. So if we want to answer the question on censorship, I think there is no gap. Because from my perspective, we need a fundamental change in using technology, and overall generations, we are not using the right tools at the moment to be free of the oppression of the big tech companies or of governments. So the answer is clearly no, because we have to fundamentally change to free software, open source software infrastructures. And I'm really glad to be here to talk a little bit about this perspective, because this is my background in my work. And also, we as Republika, which is a big event, we always try to be a platform for people who are encouraging journalists and also tech people for freedom of speech and freedom of expression. So there is a fundamental need for all generations to change media behavior in these days, and so I'm glad to be with you, and we are facing all the same challenge. So it's a positive way here to look in the future. So be strong, and we will make it.
Thank you. Yeah, I like that positive attitude. We will make it. Because sometimes I feel like when we're looking at these digital walls that have been built, and we talk about authoritarian regimes, we just heard that 72% of the world population lives in an authoritarian regime. So Gypsy, tell us, how have the tactics of these authoritarians changed? What kind of walls are they building at the moment?
Thank you so much, Liz, and thank you for having us here. Look, I will say that more broadly, my organization, the Committee to Protect Journalists, has data showing that we are at a point in time where journalists are under attack like never before. There are record numbers of journalists in prison and killed. So that's the overall background. If we look specifically at autocratic regimes, which I want to say there are electoral democracies that are exercising autocracy. So we should be clear that this is not just the Chinas and the Belaruses of the world, but actually other places with autocratic tendencies, including the United States. A journalist's path to prison begins with smears. Very often, and I think Carole was also an example of that in terms of a slap, where there's a smear campaign that happens. There is a real takedown of the journalists in order to bring, to destroy their credibility, their trust. So there's a wall that's put up, not only in terms of accessing information freely and as the general public, but a wall between the journalists and the news organization and the audience. And that begins by smearing. We have seen in Guatemala, in other places, where the journalists will be smeared. In fact, right now we're watching a list of journalists in Guatemala who are being smeared on social media. These are very targeted campaigns. And what happens is it's an indicator that a legal case will be built against you. And so you need to determine whether you need to leave the country for your safety or whether you're prepared to defend yourself and potentially face prison. The other thing that's happening is internet shutdowns and mobile service shutdowns around political protest and elections, which we saw during the mega year of elections quite often. We've seen that recently in various places. I mean, we've seen it in Iran with the situation there with the bombing by Israel, never mind the situation in Gaza where there has been a total, there's been communications blackouts on a regular basis. But these techniques are just becoming much more often deployed, even if for short periods of time.
I want to move to Patrick now to also give him a chance.
Can I just very quickly say the two other things?
Briefly.
One is surveillance, including spyware and the misuse of cybercrime laws, and the other thing that's happening is the scaled-up practice. These are relatively new things. Scaled-up practice of social media reviews at borders for content that the authorities find objectionable. This is happening in the United States, where there are many, many foreign correspondents and freelancers who come in to do reporting. I'll stop there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Gypsy. So you've given us a very comprehensive list. Patrick, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, because we are talking, in the title we say it's digital walls, but we've already found out that it's not about walls, it's not about keeping information out completely, but there's different, of course, strategies. Is there anything that you want to add to that list?
I think that's a very comprehensive list in terms of the targeting of people and like how unpleasant and how difficult it is to be a journalist. From an audience perspective, I think that there's a big challenge in the fact that they might not even know that this is happening, right? Everyone in most countries really is surrounded by an abundance of information. And when we think about censorship, we typically have this image of, the Cold War or like noise, and you finally hear the radio station. And that's not really the case right now, right? We are navigating a world where there's a lot of information, and this targeted silencing is what makes this so difficult right now to tackle.
Mm-hmm. Now, the good thing about this panel is that we're going to hear examples from two specific countries. Let me start with China, because, of course, when you talk about censorship and digital walls, China is the one country that is always cited. But Pokong, you told me that, of course, in China, it's not only about this great firewall of China that we keep talking about. The Chinese government is doing things to not only suppress press freedom in the country, but also in other countries, right?
Yes. We know China has the Great Wall, but now we have to redefine Great Wall. The Great Wall is a cyber wall, it's a digital wall. It's much more costly, much more big scale than the history Great Wall. And also Chinese people now use VPN to watch, true news, true information, just like East Germans, climb the Berlin Wall. That's the same meaning. So I want to say, Chinese government set up the digital wall as soon as the internet was born. So it's a long history, and that's the biggest digital wall. And we, Chinese dissidents, as a former democracy movement leader, political prisoner, and dissidents, we have been fighting with this wall. Also, same decades, same as long as the Chinese government set up. So because this is our continued democracy movement for our freedom of speech. Basically, Chinese government did not only one thing, they did three things. Number one, they defend. They are defensive. They use block the information, censor internet to protect their power, their dictatorship. Second, they are offensive. They attack. They form large-scale internet army to spread fake information everywhere, domestically and internationally, flood internet. Chinese people has a saying said, if you read a Chinese newspaper, everything is fake except the date. And if you watch a Chinese television, everything is fake except the weather forecast. Yeah. So the third thing, they not only do that, they export their so-called Chinese solution, China model, to other dictatorship countries, to Russia, to Belarus, to North Korea, to Iran, to Myanmar, to everywhere. So they want to set up a Beijing-centered, closed world to divide this world into two. So that's really a big challenge for this world. I said the Chinese government is not only defensive but offensive. It's a big challenge for the
So you say there
world.
are three things. There's keeping free information away from the citizens, it's flooding the zone with disinformation, and then it's always also exporting technology to other states. Yeah. Let's go to Venezuela. What is President Nicolás Maduro doing in your country?
What is it not doing? But what Mr. Chen just said, I think it's really important to understand that censorship is not only like the technological censorship regarding not being able to access certain websites like the Great Firewall of China, or in the case of Venezuela, all the independent news media system is completely blocked and it's not accessible for Venezuela. But that's not the only thing that is happening. The censorship doesn't stop there. It's the fact that you are creating your own narrative, and that's what you're selling on your official channels. Because of course, if citizens can't access any other kind of information, then you're selling this narrative of what is true, what is real, and what is your truth. And they're using, and that's what we've seen in the past few decades, it's not only official government channels, they're using social media from the same social media channels that we use. They are even using X, formerly Twitter. Even though Twitter is currently blocked in Venezuela, they still use Twitter for
They're still posting regularly
on Twitter for their misinformation campaigns.
Yeah.
And they're using TikTok for the misinformation campaigns, even though TikTok have also been blocked in Venezuela several times. And this strategy we've seen in other places and in other authoritarian regimes. This is all what we were saying before. It's just the same network of authoritarian regimes copying each other. And it doesn't have to always be the same known suspects like China, Venezuela, Iran. We've seen this in El Salvador. We've seen this like in the smear campaigns in Guatemala, and we are seeing this now in the U.S. Again, censorship, and this is the main thing, has not only digital repercussions but real life repercussions. Like we're talking about people in jail, people that are completely being disappeared. Censorship in Venezuela and digital rights, what we want to try and convey are also human rights, and this is something that we need to talk about, not only talking about China, Venezuela, but on a global scale.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So we're also, of course, not here to only talk about how large the problem is, but also talk about solutions. So let me just stay with you, because you have created, together with your team, an app, a newsreader app. Tell me what this app provides its users.
The app is called Noticias Sin Filtro, and gracias. Thank you, Liz, for talking about it. We think we need to find solutions that are a bit out of the box and go a little bit beyond of what we already know. Yes, we need to use VPN, or is there a tech gap for censorship? The reality is everyone is suffering from censorship. And I feel like I was born in a sweet spot because I'm a digital or internet native, but also I was able to play with the internet, which was when the internet was still young. But younger generations, a lot of them also don't know how to use a VPN. They only know how to consume news, like the infinite doom scrolling through social media apps.
So we assume media literacy among the younger ones, but that is not the case. Okay, so when I go to Noticias Sin Filtro, if I download it, what is it that I'm getting?
So the newsreader app, Noticias Sin Filtro, News Without Filters, is a newsreader app with an integrated VPN. The idea is that users can access independent media news in Venezuela without having that friction of downloading a VPN, turning on the VPN, and also they can find exactly what they're looking for, which is news without blocking all that noise and disinformation campaigns that we see in social media. You just get the raw news, and the most important thing is that when you access the app and the first thing you see are the breaking news, then you see the news sites that you really like or that you check a lot, and then just a chronological list of the news. And when you click on a news that you want to read, you get directly to the news media outlet. This is not a news aggregator that just takes over information from the news site and post it on an app. You're actually giving that news media article a visit. You're giving clicks, you're giving views, you're giving ad revenue, which is what they need, especially in a censored context where people aren't getting the same revenue that they were getting before the blocks.
Thank you. Pokong, let me turn to you. Because you've chosen a different path, you are on YouTube almost every day. You do live streams. Thousands of people tune in to listen to you comment on what is happening within the Chinese Communist Party. You have some insider information. What else are your viewers getting from you?
Now Chinese people more and more use VPN. So overseas Chinese people try to set up VPN for the Chinese people inside China to help them. Of course, the Chinese government they also use their fake VPN to destroy our campaign. But on the other hand, for my way, I keep in touch with Chinese.
Oh.
I keep in touch with Chinese people directly, not only VPN. So
can we get a new mic, please?
At the early time, like 20 years ago or 25 years ago, I used an email group.
Maybe you can swap. Yeah.
Maybe CCP want to discontinue.
Maybe, yeah, who knows? But they can stop us. Okay, go on.
About 25 years ago, I have to use an email group to send an email to Chinese people. So that's that time way after.
But that is working. Like you send out just. Some people are talking about high tech. I'm just going to write an email and reach my users that way.
We have to collect many email addresses, and we send it every day or every week. Then we have more social media like YouTube. Now I have like near 500,000 subscribers for my YouTube channel. So I do every day to tell Chinese people the truth, the real news, what's going on in China, what's going on in other countries, international. So even I come here, I never stop. 365 days, I never stop. I come here, I prepared 3 programs for today, tomorrow, and yesterday.
Wonderful. That's commitment.
They automatically go out. So that's very important. I set my, usually I do live show. I use like 20, every day I use like 20 to 25 minutes to tell Chinese people. More than half of them use VPN from China. They want to listen to me. I tell them the true news or what's a hot topic or what's going on inside China. Then I leave 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. So I use this way to keep in touch with Chinese people, so what they have questions. And by the way, I also not only YouTube, not only VPN, I have to daily keep in touch with the people in China, even in the party, even in the government. I want to know what's going on there. You want to know what's going on outside. So that's very important to keep your contact with your people. To help your people.
That's very good advice. All right, so you're a one-man newsroom. Andreas, we have mentioned before, and there's a discussion going on over at the other museum about how, of course, we need financing for independent journalism, right? Many independent media outlets are going to be affected by the US pulling its funds. How is that going to affect independent journalism, and how do we overcome that?
To give an answer to that, we maybe have to take a look a little bit in the past. European, and I can talk about Germany, especially Germany, the government and all the institutions have had spent billions and billions of euros into infrastructures owned by the Silicon Valley companies, and they enabled them to be in the role as not only gatekeepers, they are ruling the world now, as we heard it today. And so we have to turn that around and see the still 24% of democracy countries in the world. They have to change their procurement way, how to use technology, and they definitely have to start with public money, public code. So every line of software which is used by the public sector has to be free software and open source software, and we have to build an independent and also state-independent library of tools for also journalists. It's about how to organize the digital society in a free and open way, which is not possible at the moment, because we have not the infrastructure free available for the 75% countries in the world. They will step into the same problem we have in Germany and in Europe, that they will be addicted to Silicon Valley technology when they will maybe hopefully in the future be in a free society to use technology. So to finance independent and free journalism must be is something the governments and the people in the rich developed countries must force their government to spend the money into free and open solutions which are available around the globe, that you are not stuck into Google technology also. And so we need a free and open library for everybody, and this is possible.
Thank you very much, Andreas. So you've made a strong case for the technology that we use. You're making case for open source technology. Let's see what journalists can do to overcome these walls, and then also how journalism needs to change and adapt. Maybe Gypsy, you want to go first, talk about the journalists and their role.
I actually think that one basic thing that journalists must do is take their own security into their own hands. And I know that sounds like it's their responsibility. There is a structural responsibility, and states need to deliver that protection and that freedom. However, the fact of the matter is, safety begins at home. And so news organizations, individual journalists, and whether they're freelancers or not, need to be able to make those risk assessments, have the support to actually be trained in their own digital security, and that is going to help provide a core protection for their ability to report. We provide this kind of training. We do it tailored, depending on the needs, and many other organizations do this as well. There is often sort of an allergy to this activity, which we understand, but we've seen even in I think for us a big example was the whole election year. We conducted very many trainings in India, for example, ahead of elections. We provided VPNs in Venezuela when there was unrest before the elections, and in the United States we had over 700 journalists prior to the elections trying to get this training, with digital security being a big part of that. Never mind after the election, we've had record numbers of journalists seeking that kind of training. So take it into your own hands. There is power still that's within your reach, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. By the way, Reporters Without Borders also have a booth somewhere outside, and they offer to screen your phone to see if there is any surveillance technology installed there. So you can go check that out. Patrick, what about journalists in the newsroom? How do media companies need to change?
Just one thought, also building on what you just said, and then how journalism should change. I think newsrooms or the media organizations that still exist have not only a
You
responsibility...
need to move the mic, I think, a bit closer
Better
to...
now?
Yeah, perfect.
Not only a responsibility toward the journalists to save them, to protect them, but also towards audiences. We are so used to capturing audience data at high level, and that requires a lot of data gathering in terms of data that we gather from audiences, in addition to the advertising space that gathers also a lot of data on audiences. So there's a whole lot of data you can get on anyone really in the world, and we need to really start thinking about how do we really need that data to prove that we're successful, or are there other ways of showing that we're successful or not? And then the other way I would say in terms of how journalism should change is, I'll give you an example of a news organization that was operating in North Korea for many years, and they assumed that these North Korean audiences were listening to these broadcasts because they wanted to hear the latest information about Kim Jong-il at the time and now Kim Jong-un. And when they were able to interview a fisherman who left the country, they found out that people were actually tuning in for the weather forecast. So to you say, like, the weather forecast is right. Actually, because it turned out that the South Korean weather forecast is way better than the North Korean one. And I think that's a lot of inspiration there in terms of, for us, if we want to be able to reach people in autocracies, we better be relevant to them. And a lot more thinking needs to go into relevance.
Relevance, all right. Now, I want us to take a quick look at how institutions, multilateral organizations can also play a role. We had the EU commissioner here, we had the representative from the state government. Is there a possibility of really putting pressure on the Venezuelan government, on the Chinese government? Because we keep hearing that in statements, in news articles, in speeches, at summits, but we're not really seeing any change. So do you have trust that the EU, for example, has the power to bring change in Venezuela?
I think multilateral connections are important. Governments do care. The Venezuelan regime does care about what is happening in the UN, what happens in the EU, and we need to keep putting pressure. It doesn't mean that one day to another, and then the regime is going to be gone because the UN doesn't want them. That's not how it works. But I think if we look at history, we created these institutions for a reason. So yes, we need to keep putting pressure, but also we need to find new ways to support our objectives of bringing democracy to these authoritarian regimes. And I think one way to do it is by funding civil society organization, is by funding independent journalism. So that's a way that the European Union can work to bring democracy to Venezuela, for example. And that's what we need to keep doing, fund things to bring democracy, like Noticias Sin Filtro is a way, but bringing VPNs, training independent media into cybersecurity, and the pressure needs to be stronger than what it is right now. We need to keep pressuring from all sides and think about what can the European Union get from having a free Venezuela or a free Nicaragua or a free Cuba.
Pokong, what about the Chinese government? Do you think that it is being intimidated by international pressure at all? Because we're even seeing that the tech companies, for example, which are very powerful, they have succumbed to this censorship. They are banned, and it looks like they have, well, it's okay for them. So who is going to change things in China, like from outside? Where should the pressure come from?
When China rises as the second superpower, now the Chinese government is really, they don't care, pressure. I believe Western government and many democratic government did a lot to give them pressure or persuasion. But it's hard to convince Chinese government or persuade them or touch them. However, I think Western government or Western people community can do at least one thing. We can stop the tech giant or social media giant to compromise with the Chinese authoritarian regime. Like, there occasionally we heard news like Apple or, Google even, X, Twitter, meaning, tech giant, they were compromised with Chinese government to meet their requirement. For example, myself, I have a Twitter account. When nearly go to followers about 200,000, but suddenly, when Twitter turned to be X, when Elon Musk take over Twitter, my account was suspended. By those reasons, I sent multiple appeal, but they have a simple answer, just a violation. But there's no concrete explanation which part I violate. So it's stopped on February 16, 2023. I cannot use, Twitter. So I think the Western people must understand Chinese government not only refuse democracy, they also threaten, democracy. They not only defend themselves, they also, offend other countries. So if we don't stop the compromising just for profit, for profit reason, one day, Western may lose more and more, front line. So I think when your topic is breaking the barriers and build up bridges, right? I think the free world face a unison. We unite like from values, from ethics to technology, because it's not only internet, sensation is not only technical problem. It's not only technology problem. It's a moral and a political one. So all this, influenced not only China, influenced all over the world.
All right, so I'm looking at the clock. We're going to do one final round of just recommendations, a specific recommendation, call to action for one specific stakeholder. Patrick, I'm looking at you, so you'll have to start. What is the one thing that journalists can do, politicians can do, the EU can do for us to really be able to overcome these digital walls?
It's one recommendation I would say to any politicians here, and especially people.
They will watch the tape later.
Okay.
We'll send it to them.
Which is, I think, one of the great things that have happened in the internet freedom space over the last few years, and Noticias Sin Filtro is an example of it, is shifting the burden of censorship circumvention from the user to the publisher. And that has happened because there is an active ecosystem of activists, technologists, journalists who are working together and brainstorming and developing technology and testing globally, and they're comparing notes across autocracies, just like autocrats are comparing notes across autocracies. And a lot of that is a risk of going away because US funding of such efforts have basically disappeared or almost disappeared. And so there is a real need, there's a huge opportunity here in terms of the creativity of the space, but there's also a real need for this because Europe has been free riding to a large extent American efforts, and I worry we're feeling the cost of this very soon if we don't act.
Thank you. Gypsy.
Fully second that. Look, I think that we need to acknowledge the fact that what's happening, and the US does play a big role in this, is not just enabling censorship, but also creating the space for a takeover of the truth. And that's really, really important because once that gap is created and filled with something else that manipulates information, that has a different understanding and hijacks the notion of free expression, for example, that needs to be met with something else. And so I would say that for us, it's really important that European countries and that the EU as such understand that in terms of the global defense of media freedom, they are the front line. And the investments that they make and the choices in terms of protecting and promoting are going to count more than ever. We have an administration in the United States whose president owns a company that is now, while the government is defunding public media, and while a journalist who was arrested while live streaming, Mario Guevara, an immigrant journalist, has had everything thrown at him and is sitting in prison right now, awaiting to be freed on bail, which is being disregarded. While that's happening, the Truth Social company is beta testing international live streaming. So that needs to be met, and it needs to be met with decisive policy making. There are tools that the EU has, and the Democracy Shield and the DSA and so on and so forth. These things need to be financed, they need to be implemented, and it needs to happen quickly and decisively.
Yeah. Thank you. Andreas.
And on top of this, the times are good to convince as many people as possible to bring this funding on the table, because that's in the best way defense of our societies. So if the countries are investing in military goods, this is for our defense and security a core thing. So we have to force the governments to bring money out of these boxes into defending the freedom of the internet, and we have to overcome, and this is the second point, to overcome this European or global South narration. We have only one digital society, which is globally, and I think we have to use this dark times to more see what unites us globally in a free digital society, and this is advice to everybody around the world.
Thank you very much. Valentina, I see you agree.
I think I agree totally with what Andrea said. Also, what Gypsy, that the European Union is at the forefront of defending democratic values. And I also think that we need to bring technologists into the conversation, because right now there is a separation between tech people and media and journalists, and this has to end. We need to bring people in from all forefronts, and technology people need to be involved in the conversation, because this is also a technological conversation. This is a tech discussion. And I think when we talk about censorship, we now need to shift a focus, as Patrick said. Now it has to be anti-censorship first, or censorship resistant by design. And I think open source, funding open source projects and funding projects that fight this censorship on a technological level is something that the European Union needs to do. So again, talking to technologists to tackle this battle is something that we have to do. We can be on two different sides, because we are all trying to go to the same destination, which is democracy.
Absolutely. But we have already started building bridges here on this panel. You see, we have a good mix of technologists and journalists, which is wonderful. Pokong, you get the final word.
Final word, Qing dynasty is the last imperial dynasty of China in the modern history. The rulers of Qing dynasty have a famous saying. They said, use the barbarians' strength to control barbarians. But they did not do that successful. However, the Red dynasty did successfully. Red dynasty is a communist regime. They did it successfully. What I want to say is how the free world, the Western world, to avoid the CCP use our own technology. Sure, they were still use they invaded the intellectual property. That's their problem. But for us, how to avoid our technology to be used by CCP, by the dictatorship? Because finally, if they use our technology to against our technology, because technology is for the civilization advance, but the Chinese government use reverse purpose to stop, to hinder the civilization process. So this is a competition not only about GDP, it's about not only about the technology, it's about values. So I think that this is really the time for the free world to hold our front line to defend our democracy. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was our panel. Thank you so much to my panelists. You have been fantastic. Thank you. I'm not going to go through the replies that you have given. Thank you very much for participating. DW head of news is standing by. He's used to things starting very punctually, so we've already stolen 8 minutes of his time. Thank you very much, panelists. I'm going to ask you to go back to your seat. And now I welcome Max Hoffman. Max, where are you? Oh, you're already there. Welcome. So, it's time for your panel. What are you going to be discussing?
Yes, we have a short little movie that we'll watch in a second. Maybe a couple of words beforehand. I know there are a lot of people in this room who report the news every day in these difficult times, and I think it's time you give yourselves a round of applause for doing that with all the crises we have. This is for you guys. So, I'm the head of news. We report the news. There's a lot. And what's new is that we are the news increasingly as public media institutions, especially because of what's happening in the US. That's new for us, and unfortunately, that's not necessarily in a good way. And we have prepared a small primer for everybody who's not maybe intimately familiar with the topic.
Political instability is on the rise in many parts of the world, and the consequences for all of our audiences are enormous.
Media plurality at risk. The end of USAGM funding puts global media diversity in jeopardy. Millions risk losing access to free, independent information.
It's a dramatic situation and a backslash for free media worldwide. I think it's getting more difficult to reach people.
We have got to survive. If we don't, it is a huge gift to Russia and China and all of those who would like to plunge the world into darkness.
How can we protect information, education and media diversity independently? How can foreign broadcasters reposition themselves to become more financially independent? Breaking barriers, building bridges, rethinking global access to information. Together we see. Let's dive into the discussion, ensuring continued access to information, how to build bridges in volatile times.
We have a great panel to discuss this today. Some of them you've seen in our little introductory movie. One of them is Steve Kappas, who's here with us today. Steve, where are you? Over there. Just everybody make their way up here. Steve, of course, is the CEO and president of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberator. Difficult times.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Just take a seat over there, please. Also, from our little movie is Jonathan Munro, who is here as well from the BBC. He is the global director of BBC News, one of the strongest brands in the international market. Just take a seat here, if you will. And of course, we have our Director General, our very own Peter Limburg, who has chosen to spend his birthday on this panel today. He's also my boss. Right, Peter? Just here in the middle, right? Not in the movie, but of course, equally important are two more panelists we have today. That's Hamadou Tidiane-Sy, who's with us from Senegal today. Hamadou, over there, coming our way. Very experienced journalist, has been with many different outlets in the past, but he is now the CEO and the founder of EGCOM, which is a media training school in Dakar. So ground zero for all the people working later in the business. Please take a seat. And last but not least, of course, we have Mikhail Broniatowski, who, coming our way from over there, has been a journalist for 46 years. And it'd take probably too long to give you all the functions that he's had in the past, but right now he is, I'm always getting it mixed up with President, CEO, or Global Director, but I have it right here. So the Director of TVP World, giving us an Eastern European perspective. Thank you very much for being here, Mikhail. Okay. Just wanted to mention something before we get started. You notice this is an all-male panel. This is not by design. Sometimes it's just, people cancel, people say, okay, we're going to come to the panel. And with something as big, 2-day global media forum, this is sometimes what you end up with. That's not saying it's a bad panel, okay? It's a very good panel, but we also have a couple of all-female panels, so over the course of the 2 days, it balances out nicely. I just wanted to say that.
Introduced by a woman, no problem.
And from that, back to our topic, Steve. I mean, we're all kind of feeling the flame at the moment, but you're like in the middle of the fire with what's happening in the US. If the US administration had its way, you and your people would be gone. You wouldn't be doing the same thing anymore. Are you surprised sometimes that you still have a job?
Well, no, I'm not surprised I still have a job. I feel like with this role comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty has been around for 75 years as of last week. I came into it with my eyes wide open about the challenges that we would be facing. I will say, I did not anticipate the degree to which our survival would be threatened, but here we are. And I would basically say very simply, we need to survive this fight. There are many challenges that we're facing. I feel like we're kind of in the center of a Venn diagram of all kinds of forces that are pushing against us, that would like to see us silenced, that would like to see our journalists just simply disappear. We're operating in some of the most difficult terrain on the globe, and our people are doing brilliant work. They're doing enterprise reporting, investigative reporting, frontline war reporting, and they're doing it in places where autocrats and others would like us to just simply vanish. I think if that happens, it's a disaster. It's a huge gift, as I said in the video, to Russia and to China and to Iran. The forces that are being used against us right now are things that we all are going to have to grapple with. What is our source of funding long term? Right now, we're in a situation where our funding is in jeopardy every month, and it's been that way for much of this year. We intend to survive. We intend to figure out ways of diversifying our funding, and we intend to not yield any ground. We heard Commissioner Koss earlier today talk about the importance of covering things that are happening right now in Moldova, right now in Ukraine, right now in the Balkans. Those are places where we have journalists working as we speak. That's what we do. It's the power of local journalism. And we've made the commitment to our audiences to keep going in those areas. And so little did we expect that some of the same tactics being used by places like Russia would be used, in fact, by the US agency that has the responsibility for Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Asia and Middle East Broadcasting, Voice of America, Cuban Broadcasting, and the Open Technology Fund, to the points just made in that last panel. Little did we expect that we would be facing restrictions from the US agency that has the responsibility to keep our people safe.
Protected.
Yeah, but here we are, and we intend to win this fight.
Peter, are you surprised how quickly things can unravel if the wrong government or a government that doesn't share the same values as have been shared in the last 70, 80 years comes into power?
I mean, we all were surprised is a very modest word. I mean, we were shocked because what we saw was that what we might think the Russians and the Chinese, they dream of to silence Radio Free Europe, the own government is doing it. And yes, you can say maybe they're not smart enough to make the right decision, but it's not only being a decision made which is not smart, it's absolutely against all the interests of the United States of America. This is what really is astonishing for us, and I think we are in solidarity with the colleagues. And I mean, it's not only a international media; it's an international media which is in places where where the others are not sometimes. I mean, the BBC is not everywhere, France Médias Monde is not everywhere, we are not everywhere. And there are more than, I think, 20 languages which USAGM worldwide and RFE in particular is broadcasting in. And now there is, in most of them, there is silence or, I presume, a reduced offer, because you cannot withhold with the same quality and with the same amount of news if money is lacking. So yeah, we were shocked, and I can only hope that this journalism can continue. However, we will go there, but I think it's important.
You mentioned solidarity. What can solidarity look like? Now, the EU has, I think, funded Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, 5.5 million euros emergency funding. Is that what it should look like?
I don't have the right answer for this, or the miracle. I mean, first of all, I think one has to try to convince the US government to say that they are doing a really big mistake. And so the answer is not lying here. The answer is in Washington. It's their business. It's their operation. It's journalists who relied for decades on them, and so I think they have to find the solution. But yes, solidarity is also something that we highlight the problem, and that we take care that these things do not happen in silence. And so I think it's a good chance to show solidarity, talking about this at a global media forum on a prominent hour at a great stage with a wonderful audience. So I think this is what we can do, but we cannot now find the miracle solution.
Mikhail, you've experienced, I assume, the value of broadcasters like RFE and Radio Liberty behind the Iron Curtain.
Well, it was not Radio Liberty. In Poland, it was Radio Wolna Europa, which means Radio Free Europe. And it was, we are talking about defending democracy, fighting for free speech. And during my youth and until the end of the 80s, I didn't understand this as fight for democracy or defense of free speech. This was Radio Free Europe for us in Poland, and in all other Soviet bloc countries, was like oxygen. It was fresh air, and first of all, it was just information. You needed this radio in order to get proper news, real news, facts. Without that, we would be in darkness.
Do people still feel like that?
Not in Poland, because in Poland it's not a problem anymore. However, our colleagues from BBC think that we are in need of free speech. And so they started the program in Polish language. But for countries like Russia, all the post-Soviet republics, and Belarus as well, the need for information is the same as it was 30, 40 years ago, because they are victims of dictatures which are prevailing in their countries, and I hope not, but still disappearance of Radio Free Europe / Radio Liberty would mean a part of being harmful for American soft power. It would be disastrous for countries of this region, because without that they will be suffering from this stupid propaganda war. Luckily, we are doing, as we sit here, several organizations in Europe, public organizations, media broadcasters, are doing a lot of efforts to fill a possible gap. But I hope we in Poland won't be filling the gap. We will be joining Radio Free Europe, Radio liberty or Radio Svoboda in enlightening these societies.
I think we're going to hear that, filling the void, filling the gap. We heard a lot about that. We're still going to hear a lot about that, because what happens if, international broadcasters like the ones that are represented here don't fill the void? And my suspicion, Tidiane, is that you can say a few things about that from your perspective in Senegal, especially when it comes to the Chinese. I know, in many African countries have their quarrels with Western media, but surely it's preferable to what the Chinese are doing, right?
From my perspective, allow me to bring it at a more local level. I mean, what's happening in the world. I mean, the issue we're all facing is the issue of independent journalism, the existence of independent journalism. Because, I mean, if you go to places like Burkina Faso or Mali today, they have serious issues with the Western media itself. And there's a whole discourse against the Western media. And that discourse probably has got radicalized in some countries, but it has always been there because of the narratives, how the Africans and the African continent was represented in the Western media. So it has sort of given the space for all those newcomers to come. And what is difficult is you find yourself in between geopolitical fights. That's how, if you want to look at it from an independent perspective, that's what we see. Africa being a battleground. Now, to talk about the American issue, for that one, some independent news outlets might be affected. As you may know, independent media being extremely difficult to fund, there were some US philanthropies or US organizations that were supporting independent media. If I speak, you introduced me as the head of a journalism school. If I speak with my other head as the founder of West of News, we've been a little bit shaken. Currently, we are in a time of uncertainty because of, we used to get some sort of funding grants from the National Endowment for Democracy. And the whole American funding system is being shaken by what's happening in the US. So you add that to the restrictions that you have. For instance, who knows what's happening in Burkina Faso today? Several journalists are in exile. I was talking with a few colleagues who are in exile. In the country, some journalists are being arrested or being forced to join the military as a form of punishment. So I think in Africa, the issue is more the space being restricted with autocratic rulers. I mean, we have 4 countries that are under military rule, where the nationalistic discourse, I don't know if I say nationalistic, if it would work in Germany, but where the sovereignty issue is put at the front. You go to countries like Senegal, which was supposed to be a free country where people think, well, you are enjoying freedom of the press. As we speak, the government is fighting against the media. So
you're putting it into context of the broader conflict, but where do you see the bridges? What should be done in this very difficult situation for a lot of local media, but also the international media? Basically putting it in the context of disinformation, misinformation, bad actors coming in with wrong information, people not being able to make their own decisions based on facts.
Collaboration to make the news come out first. Where do you get the news? For instance, we have some sort of partnership with some Malian media. I don't know, I'm not sure if I would tell it. So that if they have news that they cannot broadcast, we try to broadcast it from Senegal. Probably we can look at that at a broader level. But for me also, my other take is, as journalists, a global community of journalists, we need to think, if people in the climate movement are saying, okay, climate every day. Those in the human rights field are saying freedom for everyone. We probably need also to have a global movement where we mobilize citizens to explain to them why they need independent media, why they need independent information, why they need reliable information. I think, I don't know if I have the solution to that, but from what I see is we need people who can take that up front and put it on the agenda, on the global agenda.
So media literacy and educational measures, something you are doing down there?
Beyond that, because journalists are taught not to be advocates. We don't do advocacy. And I think now it's playing against us, because we need people to do advocacy for good journalism globally.
That's a good point, you know. Advocacy. Jonathan, are we all, we're not all the same, of course, Deutsche Welle, BBC, but, you know, we're kind of think we're the good guys. We're on the right side here. And are we all bringing a knife to a gunfight when it comes to the Russians and the Chinese?
No, I don't think so. But I think the big picture here, Max, is that the battle for truth is on. And that's not going to be fought and won or lost in a defined period of time. It's on now, and it will continue to be a battle in the long run for the rest of all of our careers. And everyone in this room and everyone on this panel has a role to play in fighting that battle. Because if the bad guys get the upper hand, so to speak, then the significant effects of that for the human race, frankly, are really unthinkable. And the reason it's on now in a more acute way than before is because certain state actors, I'm thinking particularly of the Chinese and Russians, are pouring billions and billions of dollars, pounds, euros, whatever, into their global media strategy, and they're using that to put around the world what we would have previously called propaganda. We now have other words for it, misinformation and disinformation, but the fact is it's not the truth. And whilst people in communities around the world are absorbing all of that, often on their smartphones, invisibly at home, their trust in that is growing, because the presence of that media in their lives itself generates trust. That is a really worrying background against which organizations like the ones on this panel and many people from organizations in this room, we have got a different scale of job to do. So I don't think it's about knives in a gunfight or equipping ourselves with the wrong weapons. We've got to double down on what we do. What we do is spread things which we believe are true. We make mistakes, of course. Sometimes we put things out there that turn out not to be true, and the honest thing to do is then to be transparent about that. But doubling down on the mission requires journalistic will, and it also requires political will from governments who, like the government here or the government in the UK, and I hope in future the government in the US, realise that the battle for truth affects the outcomes of things like democratic elections. It affects the outcomes of stability in parts of the world that are vulnerable to instability. And unless we put the truth into those markets, the consequences are really, really dire.
It's always just going to be a fraction of what's out there, information-wise. So what's the solution of actually getting that information to the people?
There's a lot of truth in that, and you can't stop other people also pushing information, disinformation, propaganda into people's lives, into their streams. But what you can do is ensure that audiences know that when they come to certain types of journalism, they are getting impartial, fair, free reporting. And that is a very, very important badge of honor for organizations like those on this panel and others. If we lose that and we are seen to be swamped by the bad actors, we're going to find ourselves on the wrong side of history.
I would like to involve you a bit. I prepared a question. So maybe you can just, you're going to see a QR code if everything works up here on the screen. The question is, what needs to happen for international public media organizations to remain relevant? Because we are talking about relevance, right? Trust, relevance, all these things. Just type in one word where you think this would be important, or that is one of the main things you think needs to happen, keywords, and then we'll get the result for that later on. I hope it'll be bigger because I can't read it like this. In the meantime, Peter, you mentioned earlier that you are in favor of regulating the big tech giants, to some extent, at least. At least that's what I heard from your speech earlier. Could you elaborate a bit on that, in the context of this panel? What needs to happen there to get the brands out there, to trustworthy brands, free information, facts?
Well, I think you need the regulation because big tech acts like media houses. I mean, there is no difference. They offer content mostly content they haven't produced themselves and they haven't paid for. So I think it's vital for the journalists all around the world who live from private journalism. I mean, we are here, most of us, getting well funded, or not enough, but well, we get money from our governments or parliaments, with one exception, yes. But this is something where we can be working properly. But most of the journalists around the globe work for private companies, and when big tech is taking the money, which is necessary to have these enterprises running, then private journalism will be reduced. And this is, I think, a big danger for us. So I think regulation is vital. The DSA here in Europe is a very important step. And but my fear is also that European governments might get into this, let's say, bad deal. Okay, you can sell your cars in the US, but then stop regulating our big tech companies. And this is, I think, something which we have to be looking into, because it might be coming sooner than we think. And I would really hope that regulation continues, because if you look at TikTok, if you look at other platforms, they're very dodgy now, and I think it's important that we don't let these people who are organizing against our interests, our democracy, let them continue like this. So I think we need European answers, and then hopefully one day global answers, because, as I said, European perspectives are not enough. I mean, we are here in Europe, we have our perspectives, fine enough, but around the globe there are much other experiences, and we should listen to these.
Yeah, speaking of other experiences, Steve, I want to come back to you there. When it comes to regulation, often the European Union and the US have very different takes on what should happen or not. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I mean, look, I can't tell you that the absolute business model for how we go forward, it looks like just like this. I can tell you that, you know, Jonathan talked about the political will to continue to be a strong presence in this age of information warfare. And he's absolutely right to characterize it as that there is a battle for the truth right now. Yes, the administration has taken some very strong actions against us, but I can also tell you that elsewhere in Washington, especially in Congress and elsewhere, there is bipartisan support to continue to keep this mission going, and we do need to continue to cultivate that, advocate on our own behalf, tell our story better, frankly. Hours after they froze our funding back in March, we received a tremendous amount of outpouring of support and expressions of political will to see this great organization continue. Some of the loudest voices and some of the most prominent voices are from the corridors of power in Brussels, and from EU nations, from directors of organizations like Deutsche Welle. Peter came out with a very strong position in support of Radio Free Europe. And I think all of us see what's going on here now. I think if I were to answer this, I would say, like, we need to take this cohesive, we need to have a cohesive strategy with the collective talents and the collective creativity and the collective determination in order to continue to view this as a fight that cannot be lost, and in one in which we are not competitors. In fact, we all have a common interest. Our families have this at stake. We can't lose this because we simply don't want to see an organization go away. What's at stake are the fundamental freedoms of free societies. And we've got to continue to fight in corridors of power. We've got to continue to stay strong as a collective group of people who want to see this succeed. And it has to work. We've got to prevail. It's exhausting, I will tell you that, but it's no time to let up, because the forces on the other side are absolutely determined to win.
Hearing a lot, we need a strategy, we need to build the bridges. Mikhail, what could that look like concretely?
Well, simply do your job. TV stations, big media, and especially public media, which don't have to think first about business and then about their work in providing a proper view of the world, or the news, simply. So media like Deutsche Welle or BBC or TVP, Polish television, of which part is designed as for broadcasting to the east, because I'm heading the part of Polish television which is called TVP World Services. One part is TVP World in English, which is a sort of building soft power of Poland in the West and then showing the situation in the region, mainly war. But on the other hand, we just, at the beginning of March, we started 3 independent channels. One is Bielsat in Belarusian, another one is Vodtak in Russian, and our absolutely newborn child, which is Slava TV in Ukrainian. So this is how we see in Poland this role of presenting.
But you're doing that on your own?
Yes.
Okay.
I would be more than happy to cooperate with others in the European Union, but you know, when the cooperation comes, I'll be very happy. But so far, we are doing our job.
And what's hindering you to cooperate?
Nothing.
To build those bridges.
Nothing. We just started in March, so.
Yeah, well, there went a lot of thinking into that beforehand,
when we were
right?
planning for this for this platform, we never realized that there will be such a situation like we are discussing today. Who could imagine? Who could have imagined that suddenly Radio Swoboda would disappear? Luckily, if it really disappears, I hope not. We will be in place together with other colleagues from Europe, but I hope it doesn't disappear, and we will be cooperating both with them and with Deutsche Welle, with France Internationale and BBC.
I'm not sure how we do that with the results. Are they just going to appear at some point? This would be a good moment, but we can also just wait for later. So I'm just going to come back to that when it appears on the screen. All right. Tidiane, we talked a bit about media literacy. We talked about relevance, which is essential because with all the money in the world that you have, and you know, if you do stuff that people don't deem relevant or don't trust or don't even see, then that's not going to help. What do you think, because you're among international public media organizations here, what do you think needs to happen for them to be increasingly relevant in Senegal, in the markets you observe?
Interestingly enough, I worked for the BBC in another life. Agence France Presse, those big media houses, Bloomberg, France 24, all of them. I think to be relevant, and if I take a stand and put myself as a citizen, an African citizen, or a citizen from the global south, I think being fair to the global south, to those audiences you speak to, would be something great. People think these media organizations are not fair. Is it true? Isn't it? Is it false? I can't tell. But I believe trying to speak, to be closer to the audiences, to reflect more reality. It's not an issue of having African reporters or African presenters. It's in terms of content. I think people believe that in these organizations, it is too Euro-centered. You can't blame someone being in Europe, being funded by European money, not to be Eurocentric. But if you want to be relevant to the audiences in the global south, you need to listen to the audiences in the global south. You need to know what are they interested in, how do they want to be depicted. Why this discourse from the Chinese, Russians is taking root is because people believe for long they have been misportrayed. For too long they have been used. So I think the relevance of your organizations might come in trying to see how to get closer, how to be fairer to these audiences, and this I'm talking more as a consumer, as like from what I'm hearing from other fellow citizens in Africa, in the global south. That's how I would put it.
I saw you nodding, Jonathan. I saw you nodding to what he said, and I know we talked earlier about also the difficulty of reaching, news fatigue, reaching children, reaching women in certain regions.
I think the relevance point is absolutely right, and putting news or information out to audiences that don't feel that it's relevant to them is not going to help anybody in this battle. So being relevant is key, and we're trying to innovate all the time in the way that we do that. We're looking at the moment, for example, at whether in your part of the world, should we move into the Wolof language, the big spoken language in Senegal and elsewhere in West Africa. We don't currently operate in that language. That would be an innovation for us, and it would be relevant to an audience we're not currently reaching. There's another word, I think, as well as relevance, which ties together quite a few of these points. And it goes to Steve's point about the exhaustion of fighting this battle. We as an industry have got to be incredibly resilient. And resilience is something that actually feels like it's part of the heart, but actually it also requires funds to get behind resilient actions. And it takes you back to the decision-making of governments. So when we, for example, we were nearly closed down in India because of technical issues around the law. It was basically an attack on free journalism. We had to rebuild our structures in India as an act of resilience, and we're still in business in India. There are lots of parts of the world where journalists from organizations like ours are not just not welcome, it is positively hostile to work in those environments. And resilience requires digging deep. When we're kicked out of Russia for our Russian language service and we set up a newsroom in Riga to carry on servicing audiences in Russian, that's an act of resilience, but it's also costly. So for governments around the world who want us to win this battle, and I believe most governments in most developed countries do want us to win this battle, they have to recognize that requires resource behind the resilience. It's not simply an act of spirit or an act of the heart by journalists.
Yeah, absolutely right, Jonathan. And if you compare the costs for one tank, which you have when you buy a Leopard 2 tank, about 25 million, I think in a modest way. So invest in free media, independent media. I think it could be much more effective. And as you said, we are in a war, in an information war, and so I think it's something which governments should know. I hope they all understand it, because it's vital, and they shouldn't miss this chance. And what you said about relevance, I think, absolutely clear, and it's understandable why audiences in Africa say maybe they too far away, or they have their own agenda. What we do is, first of all, we regionalize, which is a word that we go into the regions and be present and be in dialogue. But I think the best thing you can do, is what we've also been doing, is cooperation, co-production. So have, for instance, African media produced together with us. Our one example, Echo Africa, which is an environmental program, is produced now in Nigeria and in Zambia and in Berlin. So we three together produce it, and I think it's a very African magazine. It's not a pure European. It's a global magazine, and I think this is something which then helps to also convince our audiences that we are into dialogue, and we are not going there with a colonial attitude and say, okay, you have to think this or that. We hope to be in dialogue with them, and that's what we're doing with co-production.
I would like to have two quick rounds before we wrap it up, because I think we can do another 5 minutes because we started late. I hope so, at least. So we have some results up there that I can now read. Thank you very much. And a lot of it revolves around remain independent, censorship, I assume, not be censored, youth engagement. And a lot of it revolves around, money, innovation, and also have high quality productions with artificial intelligence and all that. And I would like to boil all of this, sorry if I'm being too simplistic here, but like to boil it down to innovation. Right? So we're going to have one round, everybody said short. Yeah? How do we need to innovate, Jonathan, to remain relevant?
We need to meet audiences where they are, not expect them to come to us all the time. And that means being on platforms that weren't part of our working practices a number of years ago, but always, always, always with the quality of independent, robust journalism that we would expect on traditional linear media too.
Well, I would agree with that, and I also think a great example of it is what we saw in the last panel. You know, we need to invest in circumvention tools. We need to continue to be able to reach people. 3 weeks ago or so in Iran, the internet was shut down. Radio Farda is one of our largest services with one of the most successful reaches of reaching young people inside Iran who are restless, who are concerned about their futures. We've been reaching them through things like Instagram and podcasts. And so when the internet gets shut down, it becomes more challenging to distribute it. We used to have a safety net, which was provided by USAGM with feeds that would allow us to continue. Those contracts were cut back in March and April for no good reason, but those are the types of things we're up against.
Everything I would underline, yes. I would add, invest in going into more regions, being present there, having more offices, bureaus, and also invest in artificial intelligence, because this can produce better journalism for effective costs. And I think as we are tax funded, we also have to always think about it, and we shouldn't miss this train. But as I said, in a European regulation. So.
Well, I mean, innovation is a bit difficult because people tend to think of technology,
right?
But probably just changing the editorial approaches. I mean, I don't think I can put it in one word in 2 minutes or 1 minute, but I believe the way the editorial content is defined, is designed, probably there's a little niche there. I mean, I'm talking from, as I said, from the perspective of an African who lives in Africa, and not from the perspective of you guys sitting here and doing your news. I believe there's something to be found there. How to find it, how to define it may be a more difficult exercise, but it's probably where you need to look for areas of innovation.
From my point of view, we have no problem in recording, in producing our programs, mainly news, because we have professional studios. We don't have also, which is the most important thing, we don't have problem with staff, because our staff are refugees from Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, people with many years of experience, professionals. But my main problem is distribution, reach on the side of our audience, and so we are looking for every possible new way of distribution. So all social media, of course, satellite. We are trying and doing our best to be present and reachable, available for people who want to know.
So I'm a little surprised that editorial approach has such a weight here. I think it's great, but obviously also artificial intelligence, technology, distribution. Now for the last round, really quick, okay? You got to start this time. Okay. Imagine you have the US president sitting there, and you can tell him something about our topic, and he can't answer. What are you going to tell him?
Mr. President, informing better the societies of this part of the world will only help you, because America was always a symbol of freedom for our part of the world. And if you switch off this light, it will be you who will suffer, Americans, not Europeans, because Europeans will take over from you.
I'll just tell him that you're making it easy.
he's
still
there.
sitting there. You're making it easy for autocratic and military regimes to have arguments against free press and freedom of and independent journalism.
I think he should listen to his ambassadors, what they say when they report about the significance of free media in autocracies, and maybe that will help. But I think one has to have special approaches if one wants to reach Donald Trump's. So, well, but that's what I would try to do. But Steve has probably...
He's more experienced.
Okay,
huh?
no, go, Steve.
He's been thinking about that for a while, Steve.
Well, I would say to Mr. President that organizations like ours illuminate, they can inspire, we can educate, and frankly, we can help him to communicate with the world about what America's strategies, what America's priorities are, indeed what the free world wants to see in the globe. I would also say that the answer is not to have propaganda to battle propaganda. The truth is what matters, as Jonathan said earlier. I think it's absolutely critical that we continue to have organizations that are committed to the truth, that are independent, and those are the best representatives of free societies, and it's worth investing in.
I slightly worry that Steve should have had the last word on this question, but given that we're in the order we're in, I think I would say to him, the battle for truth is on. If he would join us in fighting the battle for truth, he could be the most powerful advocate for free and fair information the world has ever seen.
Thank you very much for joining our panel today. Pleasure having you. Liz, you're up, right?
Your panel. That was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being up here. Thanks.
So, Max, is the American president still there, or can we have the stage to ourselves now?
Well, you want me to sing?
Of course,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Is the imaginary president still around?
No.
He has left. All right. Okay. So we are going for a lunch break, but before you all leave, I want to inform you about what we have planned for the next hours. So during the lunch break, of course, we will have our wonderful band. Do you remember the name of the band?
No.
Kulturklingel. Kultur. Yes, exactly. Kulturklingel Orchestra will be playing at 1 from 1 to 1:30. We will have at 2 a live taping of the 77% show with Edith Kimani. At 2:15, we'll have a screening of the documentary, The Srebrenica Tape.
That should be good.
Yes, definitely, something that we recommend. And then this evening, we'll have the Freedom of Speech Award. Check out dw.com/GMF for the full program. Enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Guten Appetit.